Well, on more on this, we have DD India's Amritpal Singh joining us from Melbourne. Amritpal, Prime Minister Modi's visit to the Melbourne Cricket Ground carried a strong symbolic value. In fact, can you tell us more about the significance of this important and momentous visit and the key interactions he had at the iconic venue there?
First, let me tell you the announcement that the Prime Minister made a little while back at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, along with the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who was also accompanied by the Premier of Victoria Province. That's where Melbourne is. Melbourne is a city in the province or a state, if you want to understand in Indian context. And the Premier is an equivalent of the Chief Minister. Anyway, the two Prime Ministers reiterated their resolve to strengthening cricket ties. They jointly announced a roadmap, a sports collaboration roadmap for increasing sports facilities in India, for increasing sports infrastructure in India and learning from each other. The other big announcement that Anthony Albanese made was that the Big Bash match would be held in Chennai. Big Bash is like a cricketing league, like you have your IPL back home. So they shall be hosting a match in India, further strengthening 2020 cricket ties between the two countries. The Prime Minister also made an important announcement saying that India, which is bidding for the 2036 Olympics, would want to learn from Australia, which is hosting the 2032 Olympics here in Brisbane. And to that, Prime Minister Albanese retorted, saying that Australia will support India's bid for the 2036 Olympics. Big announcement coming there from Prime Minister Albanese that Australia shall be supporting India's bid for the 2036 Olympics. Prime Minister Modi saying we shall work very, very closely with Australia, learn from their experience in 32 in Brisbane, where they host the Olympics. So clearly both sides reiterating, Lepakshi, a resolve to strengthen ties, sporting ties between the two countries, not just in cricket, of course cricket, but because they were at the iconic Melbourne Cricket Ground, but where I am right now, the two Prime Ministers are right behind me having lunch here at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, where Prime Minister Albanese is hosting Prime Minister Modi for a lunch. Here, Steve Waugh, Lisa Sthalekar, iconic cricketers were there to receive Prime Minister, and they're invited for the lunch again. So big announcements coming here from the Melbourne Cricket Ground, using sports as an integral tool of diplomacy, of strengthening relationships between the two countries, diplomatic relationship between the two countries and the peoples of both countries, and also using sports as an anchor for development of sports facilities, sports infrastructure, sports technology, training of sportsmen in India. Lepakshi?
All right. Important day indeed, Amrit, there. The roadmap includes cooperation in sports science, also major sporting events, trade, tourism, investment. The two countries have actually unveiled a roadmap for enhanced sports cooperation, as you mentioned. What are the key initiatives under this roadmap, and how will they strengthen India-Australia ties beyond cricket?
Exactly. You asked a very pertinent question. Though cricket remains a religion in both countries, cricket remains the anchor for the sporting ties between the two countries. But the two countries wish to expand this further to other sports, sports like footy, which is a version of football here, kabaddi, the Indian game of kabaddi, increasing it to hockey. In fact, many of the Indian origin and Indian migrant migrant players are a part of their hockey teams, of their, this lady Lisa Stalika is of Indian origin, though she's an Australian. She's been the captain of their women's cricket team. They've traveled much to India as both as cricketers and as sports commentators. So I think taking the relationship, I'm talking about the sports cooperation beyond just cricket, expanding the field of it. If Prime Minister Modi stands here at the MCG and says, right standing next to Anthony Albanese, that we want to learn from you in our bid to host the Olympics. So clearly putting a resolve to increasing the scope and the width of sporting ties, taking it beyond cricket, though cricket of course remains the mainstay, given the interest in both peoples about cricket in India and in Australia, but taking it beyond that. In fact, the Prime Minister walking and interacting with little children, who presented a footy ball, which is like a rugby ball, which had PM Modi written on it to him. The Prime Minister interacting with little children, sending a message that sporting ties need to be expanded beyond just cricket, and the two nations can learn from each other. More India, given that Australia is a powerhouse of sports. They are advanced in terms of sports medicine, sports science, sports infrastructure, how they manage the stadiums. In fact, where yesterday the Prime Minister held a community event or a diaspora event was in Marvel Stadium, which is a huge stadium. So how to make that, how to take that infrastructure to the hinterland of India, how to manage that. So there is much India can learn from Australia, and Prime Minister Albanese committing, saying that they are ready to lend a hand of support, look for collaboration. The AFL, that's the Australian Football League, talking about, in fact, the President was here when the Prime Minister was here to receive him at the MCG. So a commitment to take, to increase the scope and width of this relationship beyond just cricket, Lipakshi.
All right. Also, Amrit, apart from the Melbourne Cricket Ground visit, the Prime Minister also met earlier in the day Australian opposition leader Angus. What were the key outcomes of that meeting? The Prime Minister met Angus, the leader of opposition. He's from the Liberal Party. He's the federal leader of opposition. Along with him was the leader of opposition of the Victoria State or the Victoria Province, clearly signifying, that the support that India has from Australia is bipartisan. He held closed-door meetings with the government in place under Anthony Albanese at the third annual Leaders Dialogue, but the very fact that he chose to meet the leader of opposition, and the meeting lasted for good about 25 minutes, and not just the federal leader of opposition, but also the regional or the provincial leader of opposition was there. He had yesterday at the community event met Albanese, the Prime Minister, and he had also met the Premier of the Victoria, which is equivalent to the Chief Minister in India. So, the support, the engagement between the two countries, this signifies the engagement between the two countries is one, bipartisan, across bureaucratic and political divides, giving strength to the relationship and signifying a resolve to further deepen a relationship between the two countries, in various fields, from defense to technology, to maritime security, to security of the Indo-Pacific, to trade and investment, to sporting ties, to the ties between peoples of two countries. So, deepening and strengthening this relationship. And I think what transpired, I spoke with the leader of opposition of Victoria after that meeting. She said she was mesmerized by the vision of the Prime Minister to strengthen this relationship across various sectors. And she said that given Victoria, of which Melbourne is the capital, she said given the fact that there is a huge Indian diaspora here, about 400,000 Indian diaspora here, and right,
at all levels, doctors, IT professionals, even the blue chip workers, the blue-collared workers, saying that they contribute to our economy, we value their contribution in our society, so clearly showing a bipartisan resolve to take the relationship to the next level.
Right, Amrit. In fact, day 3 of Prime Minister's visit to Australia also started with high-level engagements, and he was speaking about the diaspora. Thousands turned out at Melbourne's Marvel Stadium to hear Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese yesterday. What were the key takeaways from that event?
The key takeaways was there was an emotional connect between the Prime Minister and the large diaspora which had turned out. Marvel Stadium, a big stadium in the heart of Melbourne, 35,000 people, 35,000 Indians had turned out there. Prime Minister Albanese was there. The Premier of Victoria was there. So clearly, there was a connect. And when the Prime Minister spoke to them, they were enthused. I was at that stadium. One thing about Narendra Modi, he uses the diaspora leverage as a leverage to strengthen ties between the two countries.
Yes.
These are people who may be of Indian origin, who may have come from India, who are immigrants, but now they're Australians or they're working here. They are integral part of the Australian society. When the function started, the Australian national anthem was played and the Indian national anthem Jan Gan Man was played. I saw Australian children, second generation Australians, even first generations immigrants singing both national anthems with the same vigor. So the Prime Minister understands that very well and uses that as a key pillar of India's foreign policy. He's called them a living bridge because they are your ambassadors on ground. They are how they behave in public, how they contribute to their society, what they bring to the table, how they help the economy, businessmen, IT professionals, doctors, cabbies. I'm not just talking about the high-end Indians. I'm talking about everyday Indians who, build roads, who do farming, students who are an integral part, who contribute to the Australian economy. So that is a great leverage that India has, and the Prime Minister is smart enough to not just hold, closed-door meetings with the political leadership, but to host big stadium sized community events to use that as a pillar of India's foreign policy and to propagate that.
So Prime Minister rightly called the diaspora there as the living bridge between both the countries. Thank you so much, Amrit, for all the details from there.